So I'm here with Jeff Walker today. Jeff's been a friend for, just looking today, it's 30 years, 31 years now. And Jeff, as I think about kind of people I admire and respect, what rises to the top of my list are people who want to make a difference, and that's certainly you. People who have varied interests, that's certainly you. So you're like the Renaissance man who lives life with a purpose. So Jeff, you've reached the pinnacle in a couple of different areas. Your first career in banking, and then you were an early inventor of the private equity as we know it today. And interestingly enough, I remember you did that at a bank where you went to them and said, we should have a private equity capability. It would be good for our clients to have a friend in the business that would be good. It would be good for our middle market bankers who then have other options instead of seeing companies that they've nurtured and developed a relationship go on elsewhere. And you did that was it first Manny Jeff?
No, first at Chemical Bank. And then we went through 8 mergers later. It became JPMorgan Partners. So it was
8 mergers.
8 mergers later. So we combined teams, got good at combining good talent, bringing it together to make investments around the world.
And I remember one of those mergers you did was with when Bear Stearns collapsed. JPMorgan inherited the portfolio of private equity investments that Bear Stearns had, and that was when Joe Schaffenberger came over to the group, and he's gone on to lead the group now. So it's been a legacy of developing people, making good money, and being good for everybody in the process. And I know a particular that when Harrison was the CEO of JPMorgan Chase, that you and he were doing a lot of work in this area. That is the area that you've been focused on now, which is how to make a difference in this world, not just be a capitalist, but be a capitalist who really wants to make a difference. And I remember back then, that would be 2008 or so, 2007, you were teaching senior most people in the banking world the power of meditation. And that was pretty much unheard of.
Actually, 1998. So this was even earlier.
Wow.
The whole thing was about partnership. We set up our group, 1983 for the first time and started growing. We set up a partnership as opposed to a normal corporate structure. So we all participated in the profits and the losses, and we all grew together. And so it was, the partners all had to make a decision together. And we sat with each other every Monday for,
forever,
hours and hours. And we talked about what the opportunities were. And some of them we got right, some we didn't get right. But, we did things like JetBlue, and we did things like 800 Flowers. And we did things, that were, fun, a Brown House of Blues and Guitar Center. And so we found things that we like to grow with and found CEOs that we'd like to support. Continue to grow with them. So to me, partnership has been through my entire life, is one of the key opportunities to find people to grow with. And I did that 25 years in the private equity business. And then in 2007, retired out and started doing it in the philanthropic business.
Jeff, you didn't grow up rich, but you got to go, you were smart, so you went to good schools. And then you, of course, you got rich in the private equity business. And this is a question I couldn't ask too many people, but I feel like you're one of the people I wish I had asked this question of. And that is, as you look at wanting to have the things in life that you can, that give you access to people, give you the opportunity to have resources enough to make a difference in other people by giving them your resources, providing for your family the way you'd like to, living a life that you want to in terms of the means and houses and things like that. In 2025, how much is enough money?
It used to be the number was $75,000 a year, and that was enough. And from there on, you could still be happy. The number probably grows, with different things. But to me, it's more fun to give back and find others to do it with. So to me, no one's smart enough to do this by themselves. No one's smart enough to figure out how to make the world a better place. So the joy I've had, is finding others who have resources, but actually have knowledge or have experience to work on these hard issues together. And that's how we started working on issues like malaria. And maternal health, and we're still doing that. We're working in partnership with the governor of New Jersey and his wife Tammy to cut in half maternal deaths. And it's just fun because I work with a guy named Austin Hurst, the Hurst family, and English Soul, and I've worked with them for the last 12 years. So these deep relationships, working on hard puzzles, hard questions that aren't obvious, and how to resolve them, and not being arrogant enough to think I have the answer, but that I like working on the common problem and working on it with others. And we actually have some pretty significant impact. New Jersey, for example, went from 48th worst state in maternal health 5 years ago to today, 23rd. And they're doing a lot of amazing things to address that problem. But that's just one simple example. I'm doing these partnerships with lots of people all the time. So I'm growing and I'm giving back, and they are too. So to me, finding ways to give your money back is hard. It's not let's go, oh, geez, I'll cut a check. That's really boring. To me, it's finding ways to say, hey, this is something fun we could work on together. How can I find other people to light up? How can I find other people that I can support so that they can become even more creative?
I remember, I know you went to the University of Virginia and you've had a long involvement there, and you were involved with Monticello, the Jefferson estate there. And I remember, this must be 20 years ago, you doing Jeffersonian dinners.
Well, we created this idea of as if you were having dinner with Thomas Jefferson. And he usually had it around 3:00. They didn't eat too late. But it was a whole table conversation. As old people at Mr. Jefferson's table, you want to kind of listen to everything they had to say, because he drew a lot of really interesting. So rather than talking to just the person next to you, to the left or to the right, you talk to the whole table. You start getting to know people, and you start understanding that there's a joint brain going on here. You're connecting to theirs, and you're learning something, and you usually talk about a topic, some kind of topic. So we did that. We did it at Monticello, and then we started doing it at University of Virginia. And then I did a TED Talk, and so there's a TED Talk on it, and saying, here's how we can bring this idea out to the world. And now, luckily, many people are using that tool to say, let me learn something about, who I am, who you are, and what we can do together. And so we've been in hundreds of thousands of dinners out there all the time. And so it became a meme, which is great. And there's actually, a story about how to do it if you want. It's on our System Catalyst website. And so, you can figure out, how to do this kind of work and have fun, as well, rather than going to a boring 1,000-person dinner where you just talk to the person next to you about their dog. And it is.
You don't like dogs? Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, it's just we all got dogs. It's all something fun to work on. So yeah, I love creating these ideas that gestate out into the world, figuring out how to do system level change. It's not all about me telling everybody what to do, but it's bringing ideas that are connecting to people that can do it themselves and do it together, and they grow together.
A lot of people talk about retirement, especially as I get older and older. You hear more and more discussion about it, or people actually retiring. What's your retirement plan look like? Are you retired?
Never retiring. Always growing. My wife keeps saying, do you really have to grow every day? but looking for others to grow with. That's what Jefferson Dinners. You connect with people that are going to work with you on tough topics, and you'll grow with them.
Yep.
And I have deep relationships. From the early days when I was in business, but also even more so when there's walls down connection, work on something interesting. And so now I have, when I'm 69 years old now, as deeper relationships, if not more so, than I've ever had in my life. And to me, that's...
that's what I was getting at, Jeff, because one of the things that we talk a lot about is, and have over the last couple of years, is the importance of relationships in general. But in particular, as you just referenced, the importance of developing new relationships at whatever age you are in your life and cultivating those, working on those, being deliberate about it. And in particular, I'm concerned that too many adult friends of mine don't have enough adult male relationships. You're someone who has, and I found this easier in my life as I've gotten older, you easily have adult male relationships, but you have a lot of adult relationships with women. And
Yep.
and that's That's harder to do, but people like you have achieved a place where that you're comfortable with that. And talk to me about, are you deliberate about cultivating those relationships, and does it go beyond the mission that you're pursuing, or is it just something you fall into comfortably? Are you deliberate about it?
I've had people who are curious about life. I'm a very spiritual person, have been all my life, and looking for ways to grow, become wise, but also develop compassion for others. And then when you find that, and other people that are also compassionate for others, find some action to work on together. So whether it's external health or whether it's mental health, I am working with many people around that question of flourishing and mental health.
And you have for a long time.
And that, when you find people who also have that interest, male or female, you find that they can add some value too. So rather than just sitting, at dinner or hanging out with somebody, asking about their sports team, which isn't bad, but you actually want to work with them to accomplish as well. And working with a guy named Ray Chambers to do malaria and community health across Africa, or working at New Profit, where I was chair for a number of years with Tulane Montgomery to work on Wendy Kopp at Teach for America and Teach for All, and creating those ideas around it, or Girl Trek, where 1.8 million women are walking in 100 cities across America together 3 times a week and developing these relationships. To me, doing this with others is so rewarding. It's so fun. To me, it's like music.
Mm-hmm.
I'm a music freak and have started playing when I was in 7th grade. And that feeling of flow when you're working and playing with someone else, whether it's a musical instrument or whether it's anything else, is what I yearn for. That's, to me, spiritual. That's connecting that larger soul. So, it's easy to find people who have common interests and find ways to work with them. Just hanging out is fine, but when you start connecting and saying, what can we do to make the world a little bit better? That's really what I'm looking for.
I remember I tell people I don't really usually talk to the person sitting next to me on an airplane, but I can tell you about a dozen friends I have because I sat next to them on an airplane. And one of them was an evacuation from Houston because a big hurricane was coming. And I'm sitting next to a young lady, and we get into a conversation, and all of a sudden the common name comes up, Jeff Walker, and her name was Jennifer McCrae, and you did a book together on this subject, didn't you?
We did. It's called the Generosity Network. It's all about lowering walls between donors and doers. And Ray Chambers introduced me to Jennifer, and I still am great friends with Jennifer today. And we created the book together. She's created a course at the Kennedy School, and when she continues to teach, and how to connect to people. And you've done that all your life, in creating these generous acts with others. And that's what Jennifer and I have done. And she continues to talk and create these ripples of change, with people who have these skills, and stop having people who think, I have the money, therefore you will do what I say. That is horrible, really terrible strategy. And so finding ways to correct all these different non-profit leaders and other change agents is everything. And it's so fun to kind of reach that out. So I'm glad you did that. I'm glad Jennifer connected with you, but you guys are two natural connectors, and you ask questions. It's not just you saying, hey, this is what I'm doing. How about that? You care about people. You have compassion for them.
You mentioned not-for-profit leadership. It's been a contention of mine for a long time that, I was lucky enough to be involved with Ernst & Young's Entrepreneur of the Year program. And frankly, there wasn't a lot of use of the term entrepreneur much before their program started. Certainly brought it into the mainstream. And I've long been of the opinion, and you would know better, that there are so many people in the not-for-profit world who don't get the recognition and credit for their unbelievable entrepreneurial skills, management skills, development skills. And it's just not enough recognition of all the talent that exists in the not-for-profit world. Do you agree?
There's tons of talent. There's tons of people that have passion. Maybe slightly more women than men, what I've come across. But they want to have impact. And that's why we created System Catalyst, the podcast we've been doing for the last 3 years and growing and talking to people who are these catalysts that don't have the ego to say, I have the answers, but I want to pull together people to go after homelessness or go against mental health. Let's find ways for those that are growing up in schools to have the skills to be able to survive. This world is creating some anxiety and change. And so these catalysts are unique. They understand how to listen better. They understand that they can put governments together and nonprofits and others to go against a common problem. And so to me, having more people like that, that's entrepreneurial, but entrepreneurial in a very collaborative way. And to me, as I'm a donor and philanthropist trying to put funds out, first thing I do is look for those people, is look to kind of support them.
Mm-hmm.
And then they hook me up. It's so fun because all of a sudden they get curious and they go out and there are these lights that everyone gets attracted to because they want to ask those questions and have a common problem to go after as well. So that to me is finding those people, is connecting those people. There's a CEO of Giving Tuesday, Tasha Curran, who's awesome. We backed her almost 12 years ago. And now Giving Tuesday has $3.4 billion that was raised just on Giving Tuesday.
Wow.
And she focuses on radical generosity, a radical way of looking at it. And she has 100 countries around the globe who have Giving Tuesday efforts, and each one is local. They do it all a little bit differently, but they all want to share and they all want to have best practices together. And can you imagine if we all tried to push ahead, not just money, but action, made it a little radical? And what she talks about is she doesn't go looking for people to hire. She looks for hand raisers, people that raise their hands and say, I want to work on that. And she's found that is the most successful for her, is to find people who want to raise their hand and say, I want to work together with you on this question, grow. And that's been successful for her. So finding these hand raisers out in the world, I love doing that. I love finding those that glow. We have, can you imagine how worried parents are these days about kids going to school? So we now have 19 universities joining together to work on flourishing. It's called the Flourishing Academic Network. And we've got people working on what kind of skills can we give these kids to handle the anxiety of the environment, the anxiety of economy or war or whatever it might be. And so there are tools to do that, like breath practice, meditation, and peer work, connecting with others, and social emotional learning. So why don't colleges and universities, as well as high schools and others, teach? It used to be that's where churches used to cover it, a lot of those, and compassion, even a little less these days. So how do we start thinking about that and joining together with others? Those are the roles of a system catalyst who have those skills already because they start looking at that larger system.
Jeff, I know you have a wonderful family, you and Sue. How do you and Sue think about what exposures you provide for your children, and how do you get them involved?
We have 4 grandkids, and your grandkids are amazing. But our grandkids, 2 of our grandkids, for example, grew up on a farm that we built, and they go out in the morning and do farm chores. So they work on, for the horse, they work on the cows and the alpacas and the lambs, and then they go to school. And they're 9 years old and 6 years old. Really don't have big desire to be lost in the technology. And their mom is an old teacher, so she knows how to do that. And my other 2 kids are similar. They're down in North Carolina. My 2 grandkids are similar. So, there's no perfect answer, and each kid, as we know, is different. And exposing them to the wonders of the world. We've tried to always do that, saying, let's go experience something, different about what the world is. Let's go out west. Let's travel locally. Let's have friends over. Let's have Jeffersonian dinners. Literally, we do that as a family, or we do that with friends as well. So far, so good. But you're right. It's a big issue. And with AI now coming in, everybody's worried about it.
And managing, as you hinted at, managing device access and screen time with grandkids is getting to be tougher and tougher.
The new book just came out, and it's all about, let's try to figure out how at schools we want to put the cell phones in bags so that they're not distracting the kids while they're taking their
And schools
lessons.
that have done that seem to have great results.
It's a good idea. Let's have focus. Isn't that, ADHD is more prevalent than ever, right? And kids are distracted, right? There's so many things and addicted to, YouTube and TikTok and everything else. So how do we get them so that they can control their brains? How can we get them so they understand they can actually work and use tools like meditation and others to allow them to get so that they can make their own decisions rather than being sucked in by these ideas that come across the screen?
Have any of your 4 kids been involved in the charity work that you do?
Yeah. Actually, all my kids, some shape or form, have their own areas of interest. And we have any ideas that they have, they come to my wife and I, and we talk about it, and they put some funds out into things that they're passionate about.
Mm-hmm.
So each is a little bit different. And some of it, early stage, some people go to education. Let them go support the local school that I'm part of, or they go support, kids who are nearby and scholarships support. But then, my older daughter is interested in what, I was doing at New Profit. So it's a little role modeling as to what they might be interested in. So yes, I love it and want to motivate them to do that more. And my girls with their kids are probably a little more active. And then my younger son, who we adopted, Hunter, he's 26. He just started doing some philanthropy because he just graduated from college. And his experience has been a growth one. He's one of the more compassionate beings I know.
Tell me about your time. You've been involved in so many really interesting things. Tell me about your time at MIT Labs.
Oh, it was fun. I was on the board there with Danny Reed Hoffman and Peter Gabriel, the musician, and others, and they had a study of the brain. It was this little innovation. It was a big innovation lab. So lots of these ideas about space. In fact, I'm still on the board of one of the spinouts, Aurelia, which is focusing on bringing ideas and training people to go to space and robots and new satellite technology. But it was brilliant minds. And so finding these brilliant minds who just are doing innovation was so fun. And that's where, to me, finding these great ideas. There's one guy at Harvard now, Rudy Tanzi, who's a great friend, and he's an expert in Alzheimer's and others, but he's also very interested in subtle energy. So we have a collaboration that's actually going out and now improving that Reiki actually works. So Qigong and Reiki to heal people. And so we have a study at University of Utah and Harvard that just is coming out now, and the papers are coming out that shows that Reiki versus fakies were the controls, be able to heal carpal tunnel, and much more likely than any kind of control. So it's very strange, and that's what the MIT Media Lab helped me do, is kind of think about these unusual people going after things that were not normal, but all of a sudden there's energy fields around us. You can measure it, electromagnetic, photonic, and that actually starts affecting the way you can heal people and connect to them. And let's add the science to it. Not just weird stuff. Let's add science to prove what is actually true versus what's not true. And that to me has been so fun. I grew up, my dad worked at General Electric and he worked on the Apollo program. So I saw all these all these rocket ships lift off in Florida back in the 60s and said, I love science. How cool is that? But I also had a spiritual bent. So how do we start merging science and spirit together to start understanding what's real? And that's where meditation, it was weird when I started meditating back in 1973.
How did you come to start that? Sure.
I was at the University of Virginia. It was my first year. I was starting to do research and read about Kirlian photography and and Carlos Castaneda and a variety of other things. And the first time I meditated was 1973 at night, sitting on this property, this Speedberg property called the Dell, and said, "There's something different here. Whole body relaxation. There's this is a lot of the masters that are now coming over from India, Jack Kornfeld and John Kabat-Zinn and a lot of people who are very well known, Sharon Salzberg, and I started learning from them. And it turns out I chair the Contemplative Science Center in the University of Virginia now and have for the last 12 years. And the building we just built and we're opening this year called the Contemplative Commons, which is an amazing place for the whole university. They came in and said, we're building it on the site where I first meditated. I said, that's weird. So life seems to come back in some shape or form, and we're able to bring a lot of these tools back to kids, particularly at UVA, but also many other schools and others, because we're kind of an incubator there. So it's kind of fun and interesting, and allows me to go back to where Mr. Jefferson started the university. He was on Monticello, so it's another continuing theme of my life. One of the founding fathers.
You mentioned a couple of things there: meditation, MIT. I know you're friendly with Deepak Chopra, and I've only had the chance to meet him in the last couple of years, and I was lucky enough to be asked to be on a panel of his program, Sages and Scientists, that he did up in Cambridge in, I think it was September. And I was on a panel with this wonderful woman who's a physicist at MIT, and I had the chance to be on a panel with her. So I did my best to shut up and hear everything she had to say. And she's remarkable. Her name is Dr. Canan Dagdevian. And she's a remarkable young woman, Turkish, school in Turkey, came to the University of Illinois, Champaign-Urbana, to work with one researcher in particular who she was a fan of and admired from afar. She got into that program, got a PhD there, and now she's at MIT. And she had she's like also like you, a Renaissance person, because she's both left brain, right brain, interested. And she had an aunt who was in the Netherlands who passed at like 52 years old from breast cancer. And Dr. Janan was with her the last few weeks of her life. And her aunt said to her, with all the skills and all the energy and intelligence that you have, Dr. Janan, why don't you do something about the scourge of breast cancer? And so what she developed was, instead of the regular mammogram, which has seams in it because the way I had to do it is uncomfortable and expensive, she developed a bra that a woman would wear that has sensors on the inside that develops a complete ultrasound picture for the cost of a cup of Starbucks. And so I think it's about to change the world of women's health. And it's all because she put all of her skills and learning together, and at the request of a dying aunt, decided that this was a mission she was on. But now she's doing all kinds of things in the mechanical sciences to help in the healthcare world. And I'll get this wrong, but directionally, she was developing something now where you would put this tape on the back of across your knee that would take your walking motion, turn it into energy. That energy would be transmitted to a device that you would have on your arm. They would have different chemical mixtures in it so that it would, through ultrasound, not have to puncture your skin, but inject medications that would be formulated in the device to the exact amount you needed because of your condition at that moment, all self-contained and energy self-generating. And I hear that and I say, oh my God, there are people that are that smart who can figure out that many different forms of science at once to really make a difference in healthcare and people's lives. Wow, how amazing. So she's moving from one exercise, one experiment to the next, all about trying to use the resources around her there at MIT and the skills that she's developed to genuinely change people's lives. And she's doing it as an entrepreneur.
Well, you can, find people who you can then light up, whether it's with funding, like an entrepreneur who's doing crazy things like her, who's going to make the world a better place, or whether it's people who want a social change.
Yep.
And so you can find your next Wendy Kopp saying, hey, I'm going to support her because she's creative, she's got great ideas, and she'll work with others in kind of a managed ego way. You mentioned Deepak. He had a meeting I remember him talking about a couple of years ago, which has now become one of the most popular podcasts called the Telepathy Tapes. Mm-hmm. And it's all about these autistic kids who everybody had given up on, but they actually start communicating to their mothers and their teachers and now with each other and learn. And they're now showing the science that starts proving that there is a thing called telepathy. That is very strange. But now we're getting the scientists together and saying, well, how are they doing this? What waves are they connecting with others about? How are they learning other languages? How are they learning about, these books that they couldn't have read themselves, but they actually are learning because they're doing it, via telepathy. Well, Deepak saw one of those kids several years ago, and nobody would pay attention. And now all of a sudden, this woman who's been doing this work, Kai, has drawn attention to it. And I have never gotten a podcast sent to me more times.
Didn't 60 Minutes do a story on her?
I don't know. I haven't seen that.
Mhm.
Maybe so.
Yeah.
It became the most popular podcast, for October, November, and December. So something, it connected to somebody in some shape or form. It's like, in psychedelics, when Michael Pollan wrote his book, people all of a sudden said, there's a solution here. All of a sudden, every major university started raising money to do research around it because actually it works. If you do it well and if you do it controlled way. And so finding those entrepreneurs, finding those people who I consider Kai an entrepreneur by listening
Yes.
and going and starting to talk to these individuals and these mothers who were suffering, for years because they had these autistic kids that the system was leaving out, who now have a voice. Isn't that interesting? So it all came from the original idea from Deepak and the whole days. So where you find these ideas, who knows?
And as with all the work that you do, Jeff, and particularly around the subject you just mentioned, autism, do you have a point of view as to why the incidence of autism seems to be increasing so dramatically?
I'm not the expert by any
But you
means.
hang
I
around with a
know,
bunch.
yeah, well, I know that people, it's been around for a long time, but people didn't recognize it or didn't call it that. There's various people on the spectrum, some in a really positive way and some not. And so then you have to measure what you're seeing. And so they're calling it that. Whereas I think each person's a little different. I know a great friend whose daughter is on the spectrum and just has a different way of learning, a little bit different emotional connection to other people. So to my mind, we're all a little bit different. And so how do we find this neuro differences and help work with them? I think that's what we're hearing on things like autistic kids who probably have special gifts that we just haven't accessed yet.
Well, you see that all the time. What do they call it? But it's just a super refined skill, and it's different. I remember, my middle brother is developmentally disabled, and I remember he was in a group home one time, and there was a young man in that group home, and his thing was macabre, but airplane crashes. He knew the name, home address, and the story behind every person who was ever killed in an airplane crash. It was a phenomenal, but his ability to recall that, have that interest and recall, it's extraordinary. But in the meantime, he wasn't able to function on his own or care for himself. Just the different levels of intelligence. And of course, Dr. Gardner, I think, at one of your alma maters at Harvard, developing the thesis that there are 8 different kinds of intelligences that we all have. And I think when you see the savant syndrome play itself out, that someone has, someone walks into deaf and blind and can sit at a piano that they've never seen before, never played before, and play some beautiful piece of music. There's something to that multiple intelligences.
Well, and I'm sure you see it, but I have had many friends, kids, walk in and say, I am just really stupid. What are we talking about? Because I can't do math. I just really can't do math. Turns out this kid is potentially one of the most connected and collaborative and compassionate beings I've ever run across. And he then leveraged that into a job, and he's a headhunter. He's connecting to other people, and he's hugely successful in it.
Wow.
But he started out kind of like not thinking he had skills. No, of course he did.
Mm-hmm.
And you're just finding each of us has our unique skills, and isn't our job to find people and help them match up with where they can best be connected.
You mentioned early on, Jeff, about that you've felt like you've always been spiritual. I'd ask you to pick at that a little bit. I know you've always had an interest in science fiction, and you told us about your spirituality. How does that different from religion, and how have you reconciled where your belief system is, what role does religion play in your life, and how does that relate to your sense of spirituality?
I continue to be on the path. There's a friend of mine, Joseph Goldstein, who's an amazing teacher, and he said people used to ask him, "Are you enlightened?" And he'd laugh. And he finally says, "I'm on the path, whatever that path is." And I started out as a Southern Baptist. My parents changed to Methodist and Presbyterian, and then I became Unitarian, Universalist, and last 30 plus years I've been Buddhist. So, okay, but I call myself that, but I still am hugely open to lots of different other ideas. There's a guy named Joseph Campbell who is an amazing writer, and he was what George Lucas actually used his philosophy in Heroes strategies to write Star Wars. And I remember taking a class from him at New School in New York, and it was all about what's common across all the religions, and it's love of others, it's compassion and caring and connecting with others. It's that there's a bigger energy around us that we're all part of. To me, I am you in a different form. So we are, the spirits, and we're all connected. And so why wouldn't I help you? Because you are me in a different form. And we are going down this path together. And I'm on a different kind of path, and you are too. And maybe we can connect and talk about that. So I don't have to follow one particular religious strategy, but I definitely am spiritual. And I definitely believe that we're all there to help each other and that we're here to work with each other. So to me, that love of another and love of all others, and it's people, but also, the earth itself and taking care of that and how it takes care of us and animals and everything else. And to me, they're all connected. And I love having that conversation. And I tend to find just the people who like that conversation are also really fun people to play with and be partners with and continue to be interested in growing.
I had the occasion to speak last week with Dr. Dan Early, who's a terrific social scientist. I so enjoyed my time with him. And at the very end of our time, I said to him, "Tell me what role religion plays in your life." And unfortunately, we didn't have as much time as I would have liked. And so I said to him, we could have gone deep into that for hours. And he goes, "Let's do it the next time." But what he said was, he lives in, he was born in New York, 3 years old. His parents moved to Israel. He was in Tel Aviv last week when I spoke with him. He lives there.
Wow.
He's at Duke University, and he was for many years at MIT. But he's brilliant, and he's got such a remarkable life story, and he's got insights that are just so amazing. But I said to him, "What role religion?" He says, "Well, I'm a Jew. And I think that's important that we have a set of rules." And just like you said, most of the organized religions that we understand have a pretty common set of how we treat our fellow man, what we want in life. And it's all about having a set of rules and order and be able to live as part of a community. And he said, "But I don't believe in God." And that took me back. And he said, "I don't believe in God, but I choose to live by Judeo-Christian rules, by the rules of my Jewish faith, about giving back, tithing, so to speak, the 10 Commandments, how we relate to one another." And I would have liked to have gone deeper into that. And someday, soon, I hope we get to do that. And these areas of curiosity for me are something I get to go into and talk to smart and wonderful people like you. And I want to explore what role faith plays in our lives, the difference between faith and spirituality. And Dr. Early's working on his next gig is he's researching the last chapter, what happens in the last 5 months of our life. And your attitude about an afterlife, how will it impact how you think, how you behave, what you do? And I just think as I get older and older and more proximate to that day, I'm just incredibly curious. How do you, as a practicing Buddhist, how do you think about the question of a deity and the question of an afterlife?
I think we're like parts of the ocean where we're all droplets, and so we're all pieces of God, and we're all pieces of that larger spirit, and so that's why we're all connected. So yeah, I revere, the God, Jesus, and the Holy Spirit, and I think they're all connected in many different ways. The University of Virginia has a a group called DOPS, Department of Processual Sciences, and it studies near-death experiences and prior life experiences. And it has a lot of evidence that there are people around who remember a prior life and actually bring in languages and bring in things that they couldn't have figured out any other way. So I am open to that. That's a Buddhist philosophy, is that there's been reincarnation, that you keep coming back to learn. I think we continue to learn from each other as we continue to grow. And there you have something to offer as well. We have karma. So, we have experiences in our past that we have to talk about and work through. And that's our goal, is to have someone else who's a mirror to myself. And so when I find people, I find like you and others that we're connected. We're supposed to be on our mission with each other, and we're supposed to learn. And you are that mirror of myself. Only I can learn from you as I connect with you. And you give me feedback about how am I doing. So to me, this spirit is out there and I'm connecting to it. And the more I'm quiet, the more I meditate, the more download I get, the more ideas that pop up, the more centered I get. There's a guy named Yuval Harari who wrote a book called Sapiens, and now the next one's called Nexus.
Yep.
And he's Israeli as well. He goes on retreat a month, a year. And that's where he gets his ideas. He says he just goes out totally, no technology, goes on retreat, and says, a lot of these interesting observations about the way the world works come to him. And some people say that was just their own minds gestating. And some people say, oh, you're lowering enough your thoughts so that you're open to these other energies or ideas coming through. And I think there's something to that. How do these geniuses happen? How do you connect to these greater ideas? So whether it's Yuval or whether it's Dan or whether it's me doing this for a long time, I find actually doing this with others, meditating with others, and doing some of these experiences with others also is very transformative. So I think there's definitely spirits out there. I think we're connecting in some shape or form. I think each of us probably had angels around us or some other help support beings that we need to listen to and connect to. So that to me is the art of growth and being on some kind of path. And I'll be on the path until I'm not around anymore. And one of the interesting things I've run across is Johns Hopkins has done a lot of work on people who have cancer and near death, like within the next year or so. And they have given them in past psychedelics. And when they do psilocybin journeys, these people become more at peace and more connected to where they were going and where they are going and with their families, and understanding that there may be more out there, or it may be pretty mysterious, and so their fear seems to be reduced in a dramatic way. So who knows? I think there are tools we're continuing to look at. We're going to live longer. But I know being with others as we approach, this endpoint at some point in time is more fun. But, I've also, for some reason, had expected death any day. And when I was started at 40, and I'm 69 now, but living every day as if tomorrow's your last, and makes you prioritize and kind of think of things that you may want to make sure to happen, or ways you want to connect to people and say, I appreciate who you are and what you do with me. To me, that's a bit spiritual.
Yep.
And it's a bit changing the way that you approach the world.
Jeff, how do you, just what you said there, just begs this question for me. How do you decide what you're going to do and what you're not going to do? How do you learn to say no?
Or how do you learn to turn things off? Right? So
because you can start a million things, and
I could do a lot of things.
If I
or I may be
all
doing
the
things.
organizations you've been involved with the last 30 years, it's amazing. How do you decide when to stop doing one of those things? And
2007, I got bored. 25 years doing private equity venture capital, it just wasn't fun anymore. So I needed some growth. And to me, a wise person always, said to me, make sure 10% of your life you're always experimenting with other things. And so I had luckily been involved at Harvard in a lot of different ways. And so after I retired out of private equity venture, I went up to Harvard for a couple of years and was an executive in residence.
I remember that.
And I learned a lot. I connected with a lot of different people. And I was also playing with a guy named Ray Chambers, and he was working with the United Nations. So all of a sudden I started leaning toward that direction as well. And so if you can keep 10% of your life learning new things, connecting with new people, and trying things out, Some of those will just fall by the wayside, but others will grow in the percent of time that you want to spend, and then other things will diminish. So when I was, you know, in private equity, that clearly diminished. When I was on the new profit board for 13 years and I was chair for 8 years, that was a blast. And then I stepped down and I said, I want to learn from something else. I want to work on something else. I want to work on maternal health. I want to find ways to reduce mental health. And so you kind of have to let go of things for sure and let go of experiences. I used to love wine. Then I sold my wine collection because I said it was just time. I used to, I was on the Morgan Library Board and I was collecting rare books and I had amazing books. And then at some point I said, I need to return these to the world. I need to move on to something else. It was just taking too much of my life and times. So to me, that's an art. That's a bit spiritual too, is learning how to let go of things, lose attachments. And so you can take on new ones as well.
You mentioned psychedelics before. There's a company I've come across called Cybin, who's doing some amazing work with a New York Stock Exchange listed company, doing some amazing work. Depression is an issue that you and I are both very aware of, that it's just a chronic problem for so many people. And they're doing some work where they're curing people of depression with very concentrated treatment programs, very controlled. They're expensive because it takes several professionals working with each patient during the administration process of over 8 hours. So not counting the time they spent leading up to the actual session. Do you think that there's a lot of breakthrough there that we're likely to discover the benefits?
There's a tons of breakthroughs, and there's companies like Compass, and there's companies like Lycos. I have seen it, total transformation, but these are not the molecules that are doing it. The molecules open you up for change, but it's the integration and the therapy that comes around it that's key. People will go use them as a party drug or something, and they're terrible.
Yep.
But when you actually are working with a therapist, a serious doctor, and kind of working through, what did I experience? PTSD, for example, they're veterans. We've been working with lots of veterans who just go through and have these ideas that keep coming back to them as something, a terrible war event or some others. Using MDMA just 3 times with a therapist reduces 70% of the time PTSD down to 0.
Wow.
And there's never been a treatment like that, ever. And they use cognitive behavioral therapy. That's the other alternative treatment the VA uses.
Yep.
And so you're sitting there going, why is that? It's because it allows your default mood network in your brain to go quiet so that you can start thinking about the future rather than having this awful experience keeping coming back to you. And guess what? There are 10 times more women that have PTSD than men.
Get out.
Because of sexual violence, because of pre and postnatal traumas, many different reasons. And so you're sitting going, there's a lot of people suffering out there that these drugs can be helpful, but they are not like a normal drug. They are not just take the molecule and it'll be fine. It won't be. You have to actually work at this. And they're working on it now. NYU is doing studies around psilocybin and addictions, particularly around alcoholism, and they're having dramatically positive results.
Really?
And so you're sitting going, how can we get people so that they start reprogramming their brains and reorienting themselves in this integration period after the experience where I can replan what's important to me. I can start thinking about the addictions that I've been part of and how we move it aside, or I can start looking at the future. So yeah, I have seen it. People are now working on changing the system so that we get reimbursement. So guess what? People who can't afford it should be getting access to it, because the people in the inner city probably have more problems than just the normal middle and upper class white people. And so how do we start thinking about Medicaid and start oriented and showing that there's a return on investment there, that it'll decrease the cost in our health system if we get access to this? And in our new administration, they're very interested in these kinds of tools as well. So we're working closely with them.
You mentioned the new administration. One of the things I wanted to ask you about was the role of private community, government. And so that begs the question, would you ever consider going into government?
I was board chair in my town, and I was elected in Wilton, Connecticut for enough years. So that's about it. That's all I'm going to do for now. People yelling at me for our budget.
What haven't you done yet, Jeff, that you'd like to do? What's on the list of things you still want to make sure you dig your teeth in?
Oh, it's continuing to find cool, new, interesting things and cool, new, interesting people to help support and work with and learn from. And I will continue to do that until it's over. And I am continuing to do that every day. And if I don't, it's a problem. And I get antsy for that one. So it isn't going anywhere. I've been everywhere in the world pretty much. I'm going to the Congo in a couple of weeks, actually, with some friends. And it's guys like Doug Cahill, I both know, and I'm going to hang out with him next week. And I've known him for 40 plus years
Wow.
and lots of different ways and shapes and experiences. And to me, that's immensely rewarding, and hanging out with you and figuring out, we've known each other for so long. Where are you? Where am I? And I think we're still okay people. We're continuing to grow. And we're still trying to be interested, like you are, in finding new people to talk to and connect with. Isn't that the best?
I remember an adventure you took. I was shocked when you told me you were going to do it. And that is you packed up with some buddies and you donned a motorcycle and toured the West Coast.
I won't do that again. I was as scared as I've ever been. I think going down the highway with trucks passing me at 90 miles an hour and blowing my motorcycle, and I hadn't been that experienced either.
And you went with a
So
brother-in-law named O'Neill, who then went on to some notoriety after that trip.
yeah, that's true. He was police chief in New York City, so and commissioner. So yeah, we went too fast, and I don't. I have new appreciation for people that are on motorcycles because they are scary.
Yeah.
So, and I've done that. I think I've done my through my life. I find fears to face. And I bungee jumped off the Victoria Falls Bridge in Africa. I've gone up and broken the sound barrier multiple times. I scuba dive, in Indonesia. And to me, each time I have this queasy fear, and I kind of go, okay, I lean forward into it. And when I have most of those fears that are maybe reasonable but not crazy, they tend to fade away. So I find that that's useful.
So last question. You're one of the great investors of all time, uh, one of the fathers of the private equity community. That world has changed so much. How do you spend any time on your investment portfolio now? I know it's important to you because you want to create more to give more. How do you think about investing today?
I have been backing all my life people who have worked with me and been partners with me. And so there'll be times when they'll come in and say, hey, let's do this together, or participate in this fund that I've been managing. And so I've always done that. I'm doing less and less of individualized investing unless it's related to mental health or flourishing. And we have a group called BridgeBuilders, which we are a bunch of us, like myself, who want to work in this area and share notes with each other. So we invest together. Scott Krenz and Austin Hurst and Matt Harris and a bunch of others. So we love to do it, but I'm doing it less probably now than I used to be, and spending a little bit more time on a lot more time on my philanthropy and finding others to play with.
Well, you're living a terrific life. And I quote a friend of mine, a lady I'm friendly with, who I interviewed on a podcast more than a year ago. She wrote a book. Her name is Cynthia Covey Haller. Her father was Stephen Covey. And they worked together on the Seven Habits book. And she had been doing some work with him up until his passing. And then she decided to continue and finish that work. And that resulted in a book that you are living and you're a living example of. And the book is called Living Life in Crescendo. And you are living life in crescendo. And I applaud you for that. Hearing that title and getting to talk to Cynthia just nailed it for me when we were talking about retirement before. That notion's gone out the window for so many people now. And thank God for people like us, because life gets more exciting every day, gets more interesting, and we can have more and more impact. And that's what we're about around here, looking at people who have impact. And Jeff Walker, you are one impactful person. I'm so lucky to have you as a friend and so fortunate to know you for so long and to learn from you. And I learned a lot more from you today.
Oh, I love hanging out with you too, and being a great friend, and finding others that we can play with. So thank you for all you're doing. And I look forward to finding other ways to grow together, even in our older years.
Let's commit to living life in crescendo.
Done.
Thanks, buddy.